All right. Hello, everyone. Happy Monday evening. Normally, this would be the part of the show where I get super hyped and welcome everybody in an excited way. But the last week's been pretty tough. So we just want to take a quick second before we do get to the fun part of the show to acknowledge our friends in the Asian community, in the Asian American Pacific Islander community that went through some really horrible stuff this past week. We just want to say, much like our friends on Legends Look Back did last week, that we love you. We stand with you. There's no question that everyone belongs in the world of Star Wars and in the world as a whole, frankly. And the atrocities committed on this community over the last year, over the last forever, frankly, are unacceptable. And us at the Living Force at Utini love you and are so sorry that this is all happening and hope that everyone in our community treats everyone else with love and decency. And unfortunately, today that also extends to our friends up in Boulder, Colorado, that are going through a horrible event of their own. We hope that if you're in that area, you're staying safe. And if these events seem like they're getting to be a little much mentally, we hope that you're taking care of yourself. You're taking breaks. You're filling your life with whatever it takes to help you keep going. So if we can do that for you tonight, we'd love to. We are going to do what we can to have a great, fun evening tonight to help us all escape just a little bit. We love you all. We're excited that you're here. And with all that said, Wes, punch it. And we do the little loop. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome into the Living Force. I am one of your hosts, Eric Eilerson. Joining me tonight on the most special of nights, which is Cheryl Bell's birthday, which we'll get to in a second, is the full house. First, we have the doctors, Dr. Corey Helton. Hey, man.
Here. Happy birthday, Cheryl. Always glad to have birthdays on the show, especially when it happens on the live date. That's always fun. So, glad to be here. Look.
And it's great because you're drinking Corona, the official beer of family.
The official beer of pandemics, I suppose.
Yeah, that's it. That's how it works. We also have Dr. Charles Hankel, who made it. You made it.
I made it, guys. I'm here. I'm toasting Cheryl with a LaCroix, a LaCroix. Yeah.
Does anybody actually say LaCroix? Is that a thing?
Besides me just now.
A bit.
Maybe.
I want that shirt, Charles. Oh my God, that is sick.
Oh, you like this?
That is awesome. The contrast is stark in the live stream. I'm a big fan.
Thank you.
I also think that Yoda's eyes very much represent you after a day of clinic.
Yeah.
I listen. When you feel 900 years old, you won't look this good.
Well, let's be honest. Who could possibly look as good as Wes Jenkins, who also joins us?
Great segue. Cheers, Cheryl. Cheers. We went from amazing down to Charles is boring to my extremely boring normal H2O water.
My gosh, I am ashamed, but more so than my shame is my joy for all of you being here with us tonight. Again, an official happy birthday. Cheryl has been a foundational pillar of this community since time immemorial. And Cheryl, we're so glad that you are in the chat tonight, hanging out with us to celebrate your birthday. And of course, for those of you that hang around in our Discord and our Patreon, we'll be celebrating Cheryl's birthday tonight in our Aftermath after show. But of course, more on that to come. Real quick, because I have been told, that was the royal we. I like to drop that now and then just to keep y'all in your place. Wes, you told me that we activated something new on YouTube tonight for the show. Is that still true?
Sure. So, if you look down on your chat box, I guess right next to the video, there is a smiley face for custom emojis, and right next to it, a $sign for
Money!
super chat. So, if you click the super chat, you can throw us $1 here, $1 there, and it will display above the chat, and it'll hang up there for a little while to let, in case we miss it, we can come back to it and we can read that specific chat if we don't get to the normal chat, which we'll still get to, but it's kind of a way to do just some shout outs or some donations in the actual chat during the live show. So
That's right.
if you feel the need, please, we insist.
Buy us beer.
Yeah, hey, feel free, no pressure, but that is just a new feature because we love features. But more than features, we love our patrons on our Patreon. And we wanted to thank a couple new folks this week. Hannah Lee joined our Patreon. Welcome. Hope you're enjoying it. And Buck Johnson upgraded to an annual patron. That's right. Annual patron, which is a great way to support the show, support UTini, and of course, save a little money throughout the year. Oh, and look at that. Corey, would you mind reading our first super chat we've ever gotten?
I knew this would come back to bite me. Spiced says, I, Jedi is the single greatest piece of literature. You know, I humbly disagree, Jacob. Humbly.
It's a super chat. You have to agree legally. But thank you for that. And a reminder, that was great. We should just cancel it all now. If you are on our Patreon, we have our new Patreon schedule in April, which will start our 3-month delay on our Patreon features. Again, more news on that on the Patreon site itself, which is utini.com/Patreon. We have a patron of the week. I didn't have a good segue for that because I was going to give it to Charles, but it's audio this week. So, Charles, do you want to intro the patron of the week, I guess? I don't know. Do you feel like that?
Sure. Why not? You don't get my illustrious tones this week, but you do get the illustrious tones of none other than James Carson.
If you want to find me on Discord, make sure you look for the bow and arrow. Shout out to Kate Bishop, the better Hawkeye. Otherwise, you will be tagging someone else with the same extremely common name. You can usually find me in the Assembly chat or in the Comics channel, guiding people through 60 years of Marvel Comics. I'm also the Utini Fantasy Football League's champion of the consolation game, but that's beside the point. My Star Wars story has 3 stages. In 1999, my mother took us to pick up my dad's pre-ordered tickets for The Phantom Menace, which came with 2 action figures, Jar Jar and Darth Maul. We weren't allowed to play with them because we were too young, so they're actually still probably in our basement somewhere, getting more and more valuable by the day. Then in 2005, my friend Shane got dismissed from our 4th grade class to go see Revenge of the Sith. I was obviously very jealous. When I got home, I said, "Dad, what's a Star War?" He called my mom, who was conveniently already at Target, and she came home with the original trilogy box set. Then, 10 years later, The Force Awakens came out, and I got in deep. Before a bus ride home from NYC, I stopped at Barnes & Noble to find a book to read. The only Star Wars paperback they had was Heir to the Jedi. Luckily, it didn't kill my interest.
Ooh.
My favorite Star Wars story is still The Empire Strikes Back. In a movie full of amazing imagery, the one that still sticks with me is the first time I saw the Falcon flying into Cloud City. There are so many exciting moments to remember, but the ethereal nature of Bespin was really cool to 10-year-old me. It's been about a year since I stumbled into Utini Discord after looking for a new podcast, but the reason I'm a patron is actually thanks to my fellow patron Magdalife, who heavily encouraged me to sign up before Corey's reading of iJedi. That was definitely worth the price of admission. My question for the host is, what kind of droid do you think you would be? Charles and Corey obviously can't pick medical droid because that is boring.
I mean, he's not wrong. It is certainly true.
Wow. Thank you, James. Again, you UTini Discord all-star, I think is fair to say, especially in the assembly chat. Group, not a cult. Group, we love you. You're phenomenal.
I mean, if anybody on our team were to lead a cult, it would 100% be Heather. Let's be honest.
No question.
What's that Office quote? It's like more exciting to participate in cults. What does he say? More profitable. He says more profitable to lead them. I forget what he says. It's great. Oh man.
Well, other than Heather leading a cult, James did have a great question. What kind of droid would we be? Dang, there's so many great droids. I mean, my gut honestly goes that I would just want to basically be Chopper as a whole. Like, I kind of just want to be a little smart mouthy. I want to be able to fly some stuff and be in ships and have a good time. But absolutely hit people with like my little claw hands
And roll around on your mid-wheel.
That's right.
Run away.
Kind of, and I'm kind of like made up of some weird parts, much like my PC that I'm building that is behind my.
You can hardly see it.
That earlier.
It's dark as night.
Yeah, it's black, but it's a cube. I built it with my hands, and it might work next week. So, but yeah, Chopper
Press F for
as
doubt.
droid. Thanks, buddy. What droids are you guys gonna be?
Torture droid, obviously.
Jesus.
Yep. That checks
Wait, you
out.
and Kaylin could be torture droids together because she could be the therapist.
Yeah,
torture
she could
droid,
be
and you could be the
ITO.
actual torture droid.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Perfect.
Love that. What were you guys?
Oh man, I'd love to be. Oh man. Okay.
There's a lot of good choices.
I mean, I'd love to be an assassin droid, but
Yeah.
Yeah, the tilt, the rotating
it's
hips.
not a good time to say.
Oh,
you know,
man.
but-
Yeah. Oh yeah, with
yeah.
the blades from Clone Wars, the vibro blade stuff.
Yes, that'd
Those
be great.
dudes?
For real.
Yeah.
And then when I get old, I can be a nanny as well, and I can care for the young.
Oh no, you're talking about Mandalorian,
an
like
IG
IG,
droid.
an IG unit. Yeah.
Oh, that's
yeah,
great.
yeah.
Oh my God, that'd be hilarious. You'd be a great nanny, Wes.
Thanks.
Look, Charles, what do you got, man?
Well, lots of good answers, and I don't want to repeat any. So I feel like I've got a little bit of a protocol droid in me. I'm not gonna lie.
I can totally
Hey,
see
you
that.
said it.
I don't know. I want someone to, like, you can alter droids' behaviors and that kind of stuff. I want him to put a little bit of gonk in me. I want it like a side of
Yeah.
gonk droid with my protocol.
All right, Joxy, that's the next shirt. Put a little gonk in me.
I'm sure someone can help you out with that in the
If
back
I were
alley or something.
if I were a protocol droid, I would be that asshole protocol droid on Jabba's palace that's talking to C-3PO, and he's like, "What is your designation?" And he's like, "I am
Oh, yeah.
C-3PO." He's like, "Yes or no will do."
I think that's you in clinic, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. Do you
for
have
your
any
whole
pain?
story.
And they start to go into their whole story. Yes or no will do.
1 to 10, 1 to 10.
I don't need to hear the
James.
story. Just give me the number.
Thank you for unwittingly illuminating us more about Corey's medical career. And also thank you for being a patron, man. Love having you as community. And thank you for being a great voice in the fantasy league as we all desperately tried to beat Joxy, who drafted a quarterback in the first round and won the league. So next up, because I told Charles we try to be quick and I'm already a liar, we have a decently dense Star Wars weekly roundup. First off, the biggest news, which happened today, as is usually the case, we got a new book announcement, y'all. Inspired by the upcoming animated series Star Wars Visions, we have Ronin, an original novel by Emma Miko Candon. This is not a novelization of the Vision show, but it is inspired by one of the stories. I feel like I say this a lot, but y'all, this came out of nowhere.
I know. How many more books do they have up their sleeve this year? Like,
That are already done.
Yeah.
like, do you listen? When new Star Wars books are announced, I have both this huge moment of excitement, followed by a little sliver of like, oh God, how are we gonna fit all these roundtables into the schedule? We have to like live our lives. How are we gonna do that? There's so
Yeah.
much stuff coming out this year. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I'm super excited for this one too, though, because Visions when it was announced at the the Disney event where they announced the 13 shows or whatever, seemed like the most interesting. For those of you that don't know, Visions is going to be an animated show that's an anthology series that a bunch of Japanese creators are basically given free reign to tell their own Star Wars stories, which is
Right.
awesome. It's going to bring us new art styles, new storytelling styles, and then to have a novel based around like the new kind of Japanese storytelling is like kind of the most groundbreaking thing that's happened to canon in a while.
Yeah, for sure. There was a lot of chat in our Slack today about like what Ronin means, and it's highly tied to like samurai myth and stuff. So like it's really cool. Like I think it's gonna be really, really fun. So I'm excited for this. I hope it's like, have they talked about the animation style yet? I mean, we talked a lot about the old Clone Wars being kind of like that Samurai Jack kind of style.
Yeah.
Like I would love to see some just straight anime. Like
Yeah. I mean, we're getting it did get delayed, but we're getting a manga this year, and then we're getting a Japanese style series, and then we're getting this novel based around that. Like they're leaning into a whole new demographic of Star Wars storytelling, and I'm freaking here for it.
for sure.
Same.
Of course, speaking about a whole other demographic of Star Wars fans, our second piece of news was something that happened last week, but we didn't get to talk about it. We got some new Black Series figures with some familiar faces. If we want to throw up the most familiar face, that is Jackson the Rabbit. Got a Black Series figure in 2021.
That's phenomenal.
Oh my god.
It's also like highly detailed.
Oh yeah.
It's like creepily detailed.
Yes, like look at his face, man. He's got like these growth looking things on it. Like I don't know, man.
Look at how wide his stance is too.
He's
Like that
Oh,
just
it's a
comes
power
like that.
stance.
Yeah,
I am here. I am here to be Jackson the Rabbit. That's all.
Yeah, I love that they did this. Of course, no one was happier than Kevin Scott, resident Leppy fanatic on Twitter. He had a great old time. And of course, Jackson was not the only Black Series that got announced last week. Pre-orders went up also for Luke, specifically from Heir to the Empire with like an Islamiri lizard on him. So straight up Heir to the Empire Legends toy. We had a guy from Crimson Empire that came out, and we had Maul, specifically based on Dark Horse. There we go. There's a lot of darks in Star Wars where you think about it for a second. From the Dark Horse comics. And y'all, why did we get 4 Legends Black Series? I mean, it's awesome, but okay.
We've said 1,000 times that there's a lot of value to Legends. There's a lot of cool things. Like it would be foolish to say that Disney just like they took canon and they just wiped out Legends. That's not what they did at all. I mean, a lot of canon is incredibly inspired by Legends, right? So it's all Star Wars storytelling, and I think there's a big demographic for that. I think a lot of collectors, like especially the further out we get from like Star Wars Legends being actively done, like 2014 was the sort of final chapter, right? We're approaching a decade of being sort of Legends is retired, kind of. So I think the further out we get, the more nostalgic and maybe valuable some of that stuff gets, right? So I hope they continue to do that, pull stuff from Legends, and
absolutely would love that. And of course, if you were lucky to get your hands on them, great, because I'm pretty sure these sold out.
Yeah, probably.
At least Jackson did, which is I want to tell baby Kevin Scott that, hey, guess what? When you're an adult, you are going to be able to write about Jackson, and then they're going to make a toy of Jackson, and everyone's going to want to buy it. Amazing stuff will happen. And of course, another amazing thing that happened. These segues are just coming to me naturally, y'all, and they're really great when I call them out. We got an announcement that coming up for Pride Month, we're going to get a lot of comic variant covers in honor of the LGBTQ plus heroes and characters of Star Wars, starting with one of our favorites. That is Sana Staros from Afra, from the Star Wars comic. Oh, God, that art is so freaking good. But they announced on StarWars.com that a lot of the series are going to get variant covers featuring those characters for Pride Month, including Erica Quell is getting a variant cover, which I thought was amazing. And Lando Calrissian is getting a variant cover, which is confirming something that a lot of people had heard about of his queerness. So awesome win for that community. Again, we love anytime Star Wars kind of pushes representation forward. Each new book, now it feels like an accepted thing that it's going to have a queer character at least. So love that they're putting this in the comics and giving a lot of queer artists the opportunity to draw these characters as well. And hey, more comic art ain't ever a bad thing.
That's right. That's right.
So stoked for that. Keep your eyes peeled for all the different series. They're going to have those if you are a collector. And finally, it's a lot of news this week. We got the official cover for the Life Day Treasury coming from George Mann and Kevin Scott. This is the next book in the Myths and Fables Dark Legends line. I'm not going to say trilogy because I think there's more coming. But this is the official cover with Santa Stellangeros. Look at that. It's like Batman Santa Claus.
Batman Santa Claus. Excellent.
Yeah. Very festive.
This is a sick photo. This is like the most realistic photo we've seen from this era, too, I think. Like,
yeah.
There's a lot of detail on his lightsaber and stuff.
Yeah, because Grant Griffin did the art. He's done all the art for these books. And Kevin did confirm this is the first time we've seen Coruscant in the High Republic era is the cover of the Life Day Treasury.
Nice.
Beautiful. What's more Star Wars than that? Except for maybe the second picture that they gave us, which if you want to throw that up for a second, which is the Wookiees from Life Day, the Life Day robes.
It looks like what's the crystal ball from Lord of the Rings that what's the thing?
Palantir.
Yes, the Palantir. That's what it looks like. Like they're even holding it with like the sleeve, like Gandalf did, like so he wouldn't touch it.
Fool of a took.
I I can't believe that they're canonizing the robes from the freaking holiday special.
I can 100%.
They're there.
Like, yeah, I'm all about it.
Gosh, in a week where we got a confirmation of a new book and a bunch of new covers with all these great characters, we also got a Jackson toy and a Life Day picture. So welcome to Star Wars in 2021, everyone. It continues on going. And as a reminder to you all, so that's, Charles, was that okay? Did I get to that news quick enough? I know we got a roundtable to get to.
Fast.
Thanks, buddy. I do what I can. But not to shortchange you all. All this stuff is coming out later this year. Check out the Utini release schedule for that, where you may find, to my left here, the script book for Dr. Afro, the audio drama. Our friends at Del Rey were kind enough to send an early copy over here, which we cannot talk about to the end of the month. But this is coming out April 6th. You can order it now. And of course, Thrawn Ascendancy Greater Good on April 27th is coming up. Way too quickly for Charles's liking. Let's be clear about that.
Can't confirm.
Well, and on that note, we would hit book reviews now, but we got a round table to get to. So instead, we're going to show you that glorious merch ad that we all cannot get enough of. And then we are going to come back and finish our talk about the High Republic, Claudia Gray's Into the Dark. Be back in a sec. Oh, God. Oh, man. Seriously, we're going to have to like a $250 Patreon perk one day that you get to hear when our mics are off during the show. But until that happens, I'm going to throw it over to our very own Dr. Charles Hankel, master of the roundtables, and we're going to finish talking about Into the Dark. Charles, where were we last week?
All right. So where we were was actually still in our character section, like we typically do on the first part, but we had just gotten to the big bad villains of this book. So the first people I actually want to talk about is Nan, Heg, and the rest of the Nile. All right, we're just going to remember, y'all, these are spoiler-filled roundtables, so I'm going to go ahead and get this out there. Spoiler alert, Nan is a Nile. Okay, and we got to talk about that, y'all. Does Claudia Gray have a thing for making small, seemingly innocent female characters become the villain? Because regardless of whether or not you consider this a trend, this happened in Master and Apprentice, and now it's happening again in Into the Dark. So is she just having fun with that, trying to subvert our expectations, or is she actually trying to say something? Is there something to be learned?
That like little girls are evil?
I don't know. You tell me, Eric.
Like, don't trust them. Claudia Gray does seem to like deception. You know, she likes kind of like the bait and switch lately. Yeah, that's a good point. But I didn't trust her.
So you didn't try? Did y'all think that she was evil just out of curiosity? Like, did you pick up on that fact or suspect her before she revealed herself?
I did not.
I didn't.
I had a sneaking suspicion. It was kind of odd. It was kind of odd how it's this young girl was out there with her older caregiver, just happened to be out there, right? And so I was like, there's got to be something to this, but I didn't think she was a Nile. I didn't think she was dastardly in that kind of way. So
yeah, and I think it was kind of cool to have that revelation after having read Light of the Jedi, where we've seen like how awful the Nile can be, and like really like because they don't really go into that a whole ton in this book. It's a little more focused on the other villains, which we'll get to. So knowing that going in, when she says, "Oh, she's a Nile," all that was just uploaded, and I'm like, "Oh, cool!" Like so much of that work was done already for this character, and I think that's one of the cool things about the High Republic is that, I mean, Star Wars publishing as a whole is that they do so much work in other books that you can just kind of build on. That was kind of fun.
And
Yeah.
I don't recall in Light of the Jedi. I don't recall that there was more. It was more like warriors, right? At that with the Nile. So, and she's brought a different aspect to what the Nile. There's more than just
like
warriors
families.
out there.
Like
Exactly.
what the hell?
Yeah.
Weird, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's a moment early-ish in the book where she's muttering something to herself, and she says, "Paths will cross." And that was, I think, the first kind of inclination that you got that maybe she was a Nile. Technically, paths, like the word was starting the sentence, but it was capitalized. And so I saw that and I was like, But to your point, on page 362, Nan has this to say about being a Nile. She says, our family joined the Nile together. They offered us the chance for a better life than we could ever have had otherwise. My mother and father were proud of their choice. I'm proud of their choice. When they died in a raid, I was taken in by Haig. By then, I knew I'd always be small, that I'd have to learn how to fight smarter since I'd never be stronger, that I'd need strategic skills. Who better to teach that than a man who can no longer fight with his body and has to use his brain? So exactly like you're saying, Nan and Haig are very atypical for Nile, at least as far as we've seen so far through Light of the Jedi. I mean, we saw no elderly people. We saw no children in Light of the Jedi, but apparently they exist. And I'll also say that Nan and Haig, their attitudes seem to be a little bit different as well. They are not quite as malicious as what we've seen before. Does all of this fit with a new picture of the Nile, or do you think that they are kind of the exception to the rule?
I mean, I certainly, thinking of Nile, I certainly picture like a bunch of drug using like gangsters, right? So like that's how I picture in my head. So to think that there's like little girls and old men like just hanging out amongst those people wearing the mask, are they there at the feast and stuff and wearing the mask and cheering and going crazy and stuff? Are they in that crowd too? I mean,
Ooh.
are they like,
Yeah. Or do those people just go home after they do all their drugs?
yeah, they're like, how was your meeting, honey?
puts his mask up on the wall.
It was good.
Up on the couch.
Maybe, you know what? Maybe this is just because I've been watching a lot of Mad Men lately, but that sounds possible. Like they all go to the office and they all drink all day, and then they come home and they're like, well, hello, back in the suburbs of the Nile. They're just hanging out.
Exactly.
I mean, but it's also a commentary on like gang life as it is in the real world and has been in Star Wars, right? It's like people join gangs for security and it's a family tradition. So I do agree with Corey. I think the vast majority of the Nile are still like that one chapter that will never leave Corey's mind of Mark Thompson yelling about riding the storm from Light of the Jedi. I think that's definitely what they're going to be in my head. But this extra element fleshed them out in kind of a cool way. Just one that I don't think we're going to see repeated too much.
Yeah. One other interesting moment involving the Nile in this book came on page 383, and it was right after the Drengir had been released. And we're obviously going to talk about them in detail here in a minute, but the quote says this: for a second, the Nile hesitated. That second was long enough for Reith to recognize that these were raiders, not warriors, and their courage faltered in a conflict where no profit was to be had. And that really struck me as well, because the picture that I got from Light of the Jedi was that the Nile were very much warriors and that they were to be feared for that matter. Here, did the Nile's apparent fear of the Drengir or this moment, did it lessen their status as villains in your mind? Or do they seem any less threatening to you in this book as compared to what we saw in Light of the Jedi?
What are they? The Drengir? How do you Drengir, man. These things are freaking scary, dude. I pictured like really evil, really fast Ents from Lord of the Rings. Man, I'm on a Lord of the Rings kick tonight. I mean, seriously.
To be fair, Corey, you were reading this surrounded by terrariums, so it probably
correct.
had a bigger impact on you.
That is correct. And I did just binge watch all the Lord of the Rings special editions, like the super long ones, and we just finished The Hobbit last week. So, you know.
All right, I get that. Now, but God, now I want to watch those. I'm so excited to rewatch those again. But to your point, Charles, I do think it was interesting that like these particular analogies seem to branch out from like the normal cut of the mill, and I did find that a little bit not confusing, but it was definitely different, right? Like you have the suicide bomber essentially with Light of the Jedi, like going crazy, being like, we're gonna fight to the death, and now these ones are maybe not at that point yet. They're like, no, we just get riches and then we go home. Like, and then we leave it alone. Like, that is all they really want to do. And then they find the Drengir and they're like, ooh, no. And maybe that kind of stuff starts to weed them out, you know?
Weed them out.
I get it.
I did 2 other ones before you guys caught on. I was wondering how many I was going to have to put in the show.
Weed them out.
Okay. All right. Well, let's talk about those evil dark side weeds that we're referencing, the Drengir. All right. They first appeared on page 304, and their first words we ever get out of them are, and I quote, "Finally, some meat."
Looks like meat back on the menu, boys.
What about the legs? They don't need those.
We had nothing but Maggie bread for 3 stinking days.
Yeah. Why can't we have some meat?
Oh, these are all great clips. Wonderful, boys.
Cheryl makes a great point. The Drengir are angry Groot Ents. It is absolutely all the tree things from all popular culture in one.
Exactly.
Listen, I have to say the entire Drengir like arc in this book was probably the most enjoyable part of the book for me. Like I wouldn't say that I loved this book. Like it's not, I don't think it would make it in my top like 20 or something like that. But like all of the tree stuff when they went to that planet and stuff with that crazy transporter technology that nobody knew how to use, like that is like straight Legend stuff, man. Like that stuff happened all the time in Legend. So like it felt really nostalgic. It really sucked me in. Like the world building was good. It was scary. Like the galaxy felt like scary and unknown, and there's a lot of mystery surrounding it. And I really enjoyed that whole stuff. So when they were like crazy evil, I really liked it. I was a big fan.
Yeah, it's interestingly, I'm gonna say the Drengir might have been my least favorite part of the book, which is I know. Well, and
so
here's the
interesting.
Thing. I know that's why this book is interesting. I think because it does take a lot of strong stances, and I think that I would rather have that than not, frankly, in Star Wars. But I think that it might have been just because I loved the Nile so much in Light of the Jedi and loved when we found out the Nile thing. I'm like, oh, cool. And then the Drengir came in and I was like, cool. But like, I
great
love when
tree
Jedi,
people.
Yeah, great. Like, not exactly my kind of treat, if you know what I mean. It might be barking up the wrong tree. But I don't know. I just felt like I always love seeing Jedi like go a little crazy. Like Des losing his mind was really fun. Like whenever we see the dark side corrupt, that's like peak Star Wars. I mean, that's what they do, you know. But for some reason, it might have been like a little Spider-Man 3 syndrome for me, where they try to put in like Sandman and Venom and Harry Osborn. Like by the time we got 300 pages in, you said, Charles, we got to the Drengir. I was like, okay, just I don't know. I want a little more bang. A little more bite than bark, if you will.
I was kind of on the fence on but so I liked it and I didn't like it. I liked that it was so off the wall different than what we've been reading in canon for a while. Like a giant slender man, like weed people.
Yes.
That's what I picture. Like a 10-foot tall slender man weed person. I like how different it was, but then again, like it was like I was like plant people. I mean, you need to take some hedge clippers and just. I mean, that's it. That's all you gotta do.
But it's a lightsaber hedge clippers. So
So
you're getting all the clips tonight, Wes. My God.
You're talking about how different these things are. I want to talk about the best description that we got about them, and it was also on page 304, and it reads like this. The creature that stood before them was 2 meters tall, gnarled and hulking. It possessed nothing as central as a trunk. Instead, it seemed to be a slithering mass of thorned vine tentacles, many of them plated in bark-like armor. There did seem to be a kind of head, one antlered with thorns and possessed of a wide, grinning mouth like the trap of a carnivorous plant designed to snap shut on its prey. So, I mean, that's out there. That's definitely out there.
Yeah.
But I'm with y'all. I did find it enjoyable. One thing, though, that I wonder is, do you find yourself wishing that you didn't already know the twists with the Drengir?
Yes.
Like that the promotion for this book was done differently because they were highlighted. up front with the High Republic. They showed us them right away. They named them. They showed concept art, all this stuff, and then they were like the twist in this novel. So, do you wish that it maybe happened differently?
100%. Because honestly, the concept art is fun. Like it's a great job of making a character. But I think just on that description, if I hadn't seen that, maybe I would have thought of like these like Resident Evil-esque giant leaf things with like antler crowns, and like my imagination could have gone a little further to make him a little creepier. Whereas like I love that we're getting so much concept art for the High Republic. Like I want to know what my Jedi look like. I love seeing Marquis and Roe. Like it's awesome, 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 awesome. This is the one where it did hurt me a little bit. I'm gonna be honest.
I don't remember seeing the concept art, so it kind of threw me for a loop right when I read it.
I remember talking about it now that you bring it up, but like I forgot about it going into the book. But Wes, you and I also didn't finish this like a month and a half after Eric, so
That's true. We did power through it.
I wish I didn't remember things like you innocent little sunflowers. My goodness.
Ignorance is bliss.
You know what? You know who ruined this book? The internet. That's it.
It's true. It's true. On the flip side of that coin, just to make sure that we are expressing all views here, I did think it was fun in a way to know, something that the Jedi did not. Right. I think it did provide some suspense and sure. I don't know. It made it a little fun in that way.
That is a storytelling medium, right? Like that is that is a format in which you sort of throw the twist out first, and like the audience, it's like how Shakespeare plays worked, right? Like
and Chekhov's gun, where you show the gun at the beginning of the scene, hide it under the table, and then everyone comes in, and you're like. Like exactly. I know it's there.
It makes
the dramatic irony is rich.
It does. It does.
I paid $120,000 to learn what a Chekhov's gun was on stage, and it finally paid off in this podcast.
Worth it.
Did it, Mom?
So we found out on page 314 that the Sith are the ones who trapped the Drengir originally. So do you think, this is only kind of tangentially related, but do you think the Drengir have any sort of connection to the Force, or are they just purely weird plant people? And do they have any more importance, you think, because the Sith felt it necessary to trap them?
I don't know what do the statues do exactly, right? Like what do they do? Is it like a Force stasis thing? Like I think I would need a more of an explanation of how they work. To
it's like how
answer.
if anyone's played the God of War PS4 game, you open chests by like smashing these vases that have runes on them, and if you smash them all, then the chest opens. I think that's essentially what it is. Like if you smash the idols, then like the force field holding the Drengir at bay kind of stop them. And if that's the case, I think the story is trying to tell us that they were so evil and so full of the dark side that even the Sith didn't want to mess with them. And I think that's a cool storytelling device. I think that's a great way to add stakes onto your new character from a literary standpoint. I don't know if it stoked that much fear within me personally, but I like what the intention was behind that. I really did enjoy that part. And I think it does make them, I think that does make them a force. I think that does make them a villain to be reckoned with if the Sith were actually afraid of something, I mean, or they were just a royal pain in the ass, because I mean, also true. If you cut off one of their arms, doesn't it regenerate like a plant? Yep.
So it's just constantly coming back at you, and you're like, when is this going to end? Just throw up the statues and get them to freeze.
I forgot I had all the dark idols with me. I'm sorry, man. Like, that's how it went. I want that story.
All right. Well, I don't know what to do from there other than just move on to overarching questions.
Well, Aaron, I want to hit one thing, because Amy put it in the chat that we mentioned it in the part one, that Claudia Gray mentioned there was a big event that was removed from this book and assigned to another story. I do wonder if some of that was had to do with the idols and the Drengir and the trapping, like, because we did a little bit of that, but it wasn't like, I don't know. It felt like maybe there was more that was going to be made with that. Did you guys think that was that maybe the thing that got left out? What do you think?
I don't know. I don't really want to speculate anymore on
that's fair.
What it is, just because like it's a, if you approach a whole book like that with that speculation, it'll just drive you nuts, because you're
100% right.
We'll never know.
100% right.
We'll never know.
Yeah, I'd love to get the backstory on it though. What was taken out and where's that specific part of the book put somewhere else.
Let's make it. I want to see it in a really dramatic documentary, like 20 years from now, like talking about all the horrible shit that happened working for Lucasfilm and like
exclusively on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Great point. All right, let's do it, Charles.
Okay, overarching question time, and we have plenty of them. I'm gonna start you off with a softball. In your mind, what is the dark that the title is referring to? Into the Dark.
Yes, the softball.
Yes. Easy.
Is it literally just like the dark side? Like, is it touching pure darkness?
No, it's just
like,
space. It's space, bro.
It was originally called Going to Space, but you're like, Claudia, that sucks.
Is this the first time we've seen dark side lore in the High Republic, though? Like, is the Sith, apparently the Sith had to do something with it, so maybe.
Markion mentions it, but he doesn't actually employ it as far as we know.
Unless his stone phallic object that he has
his purple torture rod.
Yes.
We're going to get another weird iTunes review, I swear to God. Yep. By the way, we haven't said this in months. Head over to Apple Podcasts and give us some ratings and reviews.
Yes, just don't tell us that we swear too much, because that is objectively false. I don't swear enough.
So we don't know.
Damn it.
We don't know what the dark is. We don't know what the dark is, but I think we're heading into it right now. So
yes, we are. We're plunging, baby. Dive, dive, dive.
All right, so let's move on. Different question.
Charles, spin.
Jose had a good point. It's going into a mission without knowing what they're going to find.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Going into it blind. Pretty much.
Yeah, because you're right. The typical adventure story is we know the enemy, we're gonna go fight them and do this thing. There's something on this station. You know, it reminds me of. Did you guys ever play Prey? I guess I'm in a video games kick. Did you guys ever play Prey? The most recent
I know what you're
one.
Talking about though.
Yeah, you're like on a space station all by yourself, and it's all dark and it's really freaking creepy. But I definitely got some of those vibes.
Okay. Well, tell me this: how did this telling of the Great Disaster hit you? No pun intended. Did it hold the same weight of the first telling in Light of the Jedi? Because this time we actually got to experience it with one group and kind of stick with them through all of the aftermath. So did that kind of change your experience at all? There
were a few details in this book that about the Great Disaster that kind of bothered me a little bit, to be honest. Like in Light of the Jedi, it was hard to figure out like what the Great Disaster was, right? Like there was like all this, like there was a lot of mystery in the first half of the book of trying to identify, is it a ship? There's people on board. Like there was a lot of build up to that. And in this book, the characters almost like superpower, like just figured it out in like 2 seconds, right? Like, and that was a little jarring. I mean, given this is a young adult book, so that's going to happen. You can never forget this is young adult. That does change the nature a little bit.
Yeah, and they did like obviously not want to retread the whole thing because they assume most people reading this have read Light of the Jedi. True. But I do agree though that it didn't. I mean, God, those prologue chapters were something special in Light of the Jedi. That like setting up the Great Disaster through the eyes of all those ordinary quote unquote people. That's kind of a once in a publishing cycle kind of thing you need to do.
Yeah.
So I get why they did it, but I think you're right, Corey. I think they do sacrifice a little bit of emotional.
Yeah, it seemed rather quick. And they moved on to the core story of the book, if you will, and they kind of left that out.
Yeah, it's like, oh wow, billions of people may have died, but the idols of darkness, like, okay, all right, I'm sure they'll be fine. Are these plant monsters pretty creepy?
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Gosh, I wonder if all those galaxies are going to be destroyed by all those ships. Will hyperspace ever be reopened? Hey, Orla, we used to come here when we were kids, didn't we? Read the room, guys. Have you met my friend? He's a rock.
All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about Master Jorah's riddle. Yeah, sometimes all you can do is just move on.
That's right, baby.
Enough.
let's talk a little bit about Master Jorah's riddle for Reeth. Maybe we can be a little bit more serious with this one.
All right.
Yeah.
She tells him this: neither you nor any other Jedi has ever crossed the Kyber Arch alone, nor will anyone ever do so. When you know the answer why, I believe you'll understand why we're headed to the frontier. And just to remind everyone, the Kyber Arch, we found out in this novel, is essentially kind of like an art piece that's used for meditation, made out of the Kyber crystals of all of the Jedi who have fallen in battle, that they've been able to recover these crystals. And it's used almost as the centerpiece in this room that people meditate. And periodically, Jedi will try to cross this physically. They will walk across the Kyber Arch and back. And Master Jorah is asking, how is it that no Jedi can do that alone? Reeth is very confused by this because Jedi do it alone all the time, or at least that's what he understands. But ultimately, he does answer the riddle. And the answer to the riddle is that no Jedi can cross the Kyber Arch alone because the Arch itself would not exist without those prior Jedi who had fallen in battle. Those Kyber crystals wouldn't have been gathered. They wouldn't have formed into the Kyber Arch, right? So that's the answer to the riddle itself. But help me to understand this part. How exactly does it explain then why Reeth needs to go to the frontier? Because that's what Master Jorah is really trying to drive at. She said, when you answer this, you will know why we need to go to the frontier. So why is that?
So in Master and Apprentice, Claudia Gray spins some of the most brilliant Star Wars prophetic language that we've ever seen in literature, right? Like some of her prophecies, some of her work is just beautiful stuff. This was a bit lower than her normal par for me, because I do think I agree with you, Charles. I'm not sure actually how that fits. I think it was a little bit of a stretch. I think that there was like no Jedi's ever alone because you have the Force with you, the Force is with me, all that kind of stuff. Like that seemed pretty clear, I guess. And for someone that studies as much as Reeth, it seemed like it kind of played him a little below his intelligence to have that lesson. But then again, if the lesson was, so you have to go to the frontier, I'm like, oh yeah, of course he didn't get that because I didn't get it.
Yeah, maybe it's something that comes back later, perhaps. Like he looks back on it as it drives him nuts now that this master's gone and he still hasn't figured it out. Like, I don't know. Like, I would like to see maybe explained a little more. I don't know. I couldn't really figure that out either. Then he crosses it in the book, and like,
yeah.
Even
Which
after,
he has to. It's the hero story.
I know. But even after he crosses it, he's like, "What the hell? I don't get this stupid riddle."
Maybe he kind of like got off after crossing it. Was just like, okay, like that was it.
I did it. Like, and yeah.
I guess she was just wrong, and there's no lesson at all. Anyways,
yeah. Let's see. I'm gonna read. In the chat, Cheryl brings up a point. She says, I just think it's literally like in order to grow, you need to learn alongside others who have different life experiences and views. So that may totally be
like that.
Like the Kyber crystals were gathered from those that went off and had adventures, and they get to teach people later on. So if you don't do your part, then you're not going to be able to add your story to this arch. You're not going to be able to influence the Jedi going forward and kind of do your role. I like that. Sure, I like that. Cheryl, that's good.
So kind of
get her a seat. Get her a seat. Get her a square in this live show.
With every fallen Jedi, there's an additional reach for them to have their teachings and to grow outside of their core, like outside of Coruscant, let's say. And then so if he wants to, I don't know, he needed to go to the frontier, is because he needs to expand his reach, just like all those other people before him.
Reach Silas,
but not die.
Yeah, I like that too. Ooh, and Cad Ben also, we got our comment section is always so great. Cad Ben says maybe it was an odd way of implying that he can't sufficiently progress as a Jedi by learning in solitude and staying on Coruscant, that he needs to make sacrifices like the contributions to the Arch. So yeah, very similar idea. I think that's definitely it. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
All right, well, thanks, chat. I'll ask that next time.
But we're useless up here.
I want to move on to a big section of the overarching questions.
overarching questions.
Coda. Oh my God, y'all.
Hi,
Eric,
Coda. Say hi.
Eric, you are on point tonight with your jokes. This has been Comedy Central premium blend.
We've had so many pet appearances tonight too. I've been attacked by Ray and Kylo, and now Coda's in here.
Like Coda's eyes. Like all we see is the eye of Coda. Oh, never mind. Sorry. Bye.
He's gonna go get a toy to attack me with next. But all right, next part of the round, or part of this overarching question section, I'm calling it the failings of the Jedi, because Claudia Gray does not shy away from calling out the Jedi on some stuff. It was a part of her writing that we actually loved in Master and Apprentice, and she did pick up on some of those same kind of thought processes in this book. And the first one came nice and early, page 11, and it reads like this. When the searchers went around looking for force-sensitive infants, they only checked for potential ability, not temperament, and certainly not preferences. Nobody ever asked the younglings, would you like to become a swashbuckling heroic knight, or would you rather stay home and read? Some people, however courageous and capable they might be, still preferred reading stories to living them, and Reith was among that number. So straight up, why is it okay for Jedi to kidnap little kids? Why?
To help the galaxy, they're gonna need it. They foresaw it.
This has been addressed a bunch of times that the Jedi don't kidnap the kids. Like they discuss with the parents and just highly coerce them into giving up their child. Right? It's a little different.
Yeah.
You sound like one of them.
Yeah, I do think that because we talked about this a lot on honestly our Phantom Menace episode or something, because I was the Anakin whole thing is like, you're not a slave anymore, you're gonna come here and you got a bunch of rules, you gotta stay in this house, don't leave. Like it's the same kind of deal. But I do think that's the important part when we read more about Jedi being found as children is, they go to the parents and say, your child has force sensitive abilities, we can take them and they will learn and they can basically serve the galaxy and in this illustrious order. It is an honorable thing, right? So I think that's it. There is an honor, especially at this point, at the peak of the Jedi, right? High Republic is like, they're all stars, they're absolute heroes. Someone comes to your house and says, hey, your kid is going to be a Jedi. And, will you sacrifice your part by letting them go to play a part in the Song of the Galaxy? And I think that's the gist. That's what I'd say, even if it was a lie.
Okay. I'd be interested to see, I don't know, maybe some stories about parents who said no. I think that's kind of interesting. But
yeah, that is interesting. Because there's like, no, you can't take him. They're like, all right, whatever, we're taking him. I mean, like there's no is not an answer.
Well, hey, you know what? That is kind of like Force Collector, the book we never did a roundtable on. But like,
that's why I'm not familiar.
But that is kind of what happens is that the Force runs in the family and they kind of try to deny it, and the kid finds out by himself. And I think that's the scariest thing. That's like the X-Men thing, right? Is that you're 16 and all of a sudden you accidentally, blow up a building with your powers you didn't know you had.
Yep.
And I wish I could.
Which is bad.
That is bad. Well, something else that's bad happened on page 92, and it's Affy thinking, and she says, or the book says rather, she didn't dislike any of the Republic types actually, but it was very obvious how much they thought they were the ones bringing wisdom and knowledge. About time they learned better. And this really caught my fancy because at face value, the job of the Jedi in the High Republic seems very noble, right? To bring peace to the far reaches of the galaxy. But is that also kind of the height of arrogance? Like, do they think that they are better than everyone in the outer reaches of space? And Corey, before you answer, might this be looked at as sort of an allegory for Manifest Destiny? I mean, why do the Jedi have to go, or the Republic, even, why does it have to spread to the outer reaches? Is it something that those people even want?
They just want the resources, let's be honest.
I mean, I want freedom,
manifest destiny,
security, my new empire. Like, yeah, man, you nailed it. I mean, that's the Starlight Beacon is kind of the example of, idyllic hope. It's the best of intentions that is definitely subconsciously manifest destiny, empirical expansion. Like, oh no, you're not happy actually.
I know.
You need the Republic. And some of them do. And some of them are like, hey, have some water, but also your clothes are dumb. Wear ours instead, and that's like how colonialism kind of starts to happen. Like
how white of the High Republic.
Yeah,
it's a very tunnel vision.
It is.
Looking
it
at
is.
it.
Look,
yeah.
Yeah.
I do think.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does help that there's like clearly like if we go to the behind the scenes for a second of it all, like it helps that there is a diverse group of creators and a diverse readership that are creating this thing that's not just like, and all the white people want to do Manifest Destiny books. Like that's a rough look. But it is kind of inescapable as a theme, and I'm excited to see how that. I think we said that maybe in the light of the Jedi Roundtable to see if that becomes more of a thing. The further we get into the era, the further we get into the projects about the Starlight Beacon itself.
Yeah, it's very smug of them to think that they know what's better for other people.
Yeah.
By not, you know,
sorry, Cheryl.
by smelling their own farts. No, I'm just kidding.
It sounds like a cult. This is the cult we talked about. Yeah,
it is.
It is
Sure.
a cult. Everything in Star Wars is a cult. All right. Anyways, that's another one of my really good segues.
That's right. You're killing it.
I want to talk about Comac because a lot of the failings of the Jedi, quote unquote, as I'm calling them, come from Comac, you know, or him having those thoughts rather. And his meditation, his meditation thoughts on page 128 are as follows. How does the dark side take form anywhere? Sometimes I think we, the Jedi, must be somehow to blame. We who refuse to look at the Force in full, to examine the darkness as well as the light. How can we split the Force in two? How can we justify such an act of violence? And it is violence, such a dividing, even the darkness divided from the light. And then he goes on page 421, so much later, but he talks about a similar thing. He says, the darkness is as much a part of the Force as the light. The Order thinks it can bisect the Force so neatly, as though the primal living energy of all existence were a thing to be sliced and served. Reith took a moment to consider. Doesn't that separation keep us safe? Does it, Master Comac said? Or does the divide only make the darkness darker, more dangerous than it ever would have been in a state of nature? So Comac is great at being a Jedi Master. You just answer a question with a question. But I think we should try to answer that question here. Let's settle this once and for all. Is the dark side a bad thing or not? Because there's this never-ending debate in Star Wars material. I feel like more so in canon than we even ever got in Legends about whether or not Jedi should study the dark side. Is it an inherently bad thing, or is the Force just the Force? And all that matters is how you use it. I mean, this was in the sequel trilogy. This has been in countless novels now up to this point. And we keep raising the question and never really answering it. And so I want to get your thoughts.
Right, because there's all this talk about balance in canon stuff, right? There's always going to be dark and light. So, like, how can you only... It's like Luke says in The Last Jedi, like, it's folly to believe that the Jedi represent the light. Like... Yeah, I don't know. I don't have an answer for this question. I think this is like one of those philosophical, foundational questions in Star Wars. Is the nature of the Force? What is it? Is it light side, dark side? Like, is it bad? Is it good? Like, I think it's how you wield it is the obvious answer.
Are there any examples of Jedi or Force users that both study both the light and the dark and then are indifferent to either or just the dark always takes over unless you're
the Bendu?
The Bendu, yeah. Okay.
The Bendu is probably the clearest. I think for me, like no like thought experiments, no like bits, just like purely what I believe as like in all honesty. Is that absolutely the light side is good, the dark side is evil. I think if we're going from the pure intentions of the storytelling of the universe, I think that's pretty clear. As far as everything George has ever said, all of Star Wars is to teach kids to go for the light, to be good, and to reject the evil, which is dark.
Right.
Now, I do think one thing that Jose says nicely in the chat is that the Jedi should study the dark. I think that's like any good military will always study the tactics of the enemy, right? I mean, you need to understand it. But I think the ideal Jedi is studying the dark in order to be aware of it, in order to resist it, in order to live in peace and tranquility with all living things, which I think is the epitome of the light side. The dark side is control. The dark side is selfish interests. And I think those can pop up now and then. But to say that like you need to be 50% light, 50% dark, I think is an interesting thought experiment for us as adults, but not really the spirit of the universe and not really what the point that Lucas and all those creative sense are actually trying to make.
Yeah. I do agree with that. I like that. Sometimes I worry we're overcomplicating things too much because the source material really is very straightforward, as you say, Eric. And sometimes it's nice to have those myths where it really is good and bad. And
it is like yeah, sorry, I was gonna say it reminds me of the idea of like, well, you need to hear both sides to every story. And it's like, no, you don't sometimes. Like sometimes there is legitimately the good and the evil. And I think that a lot of dark side stories come with like it's Maul in season 2 of Rebels. Like, no, Ezra, just listen to the dark. And that ability for him to give credence to that almost destroys him at the end of that season. So I think that those stories are also warning about that false equivalence as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
that's the dark. That's the into the dark. We figured it out.
It's the dark.
We did it.
Brain hurts.
Well,
it all goes back to Rebels.
Let's talk some specifics about that dark side, whatever the dark side is, because we got some interesting information, I think, about it in this novel. And the first bit comes on page 119 when Comac says, throughout the galaxy, there have been legends of objects imbued with the dark side, of amulets and crystals, and even glaciers that contained as much malevolence as any living creature. Some said that the most powerful Sith of old were able to do that, to infuse their own darkness into the objects around them. So that's one bit. Then on page 187, we get this. The Jedi Elders have identified 3 main kinds of Force artifacts. There are artifacts that contain certain memories or even personalities of past Force users. There are artifacts that enhance a Jedi's ability to use the Force. And then there are artifacts that hinder or confound that ability. Force dampeners, you could call them. So I'm curious, do we have examples of all of these before? Have we seen all of these, or is any of this new?
Well, in Frozen 2, we learned that water has memory. And that's also Disney. So that's the glacier.
Oh my god! My wife Caitlin watched the what's his name? Is it Patton Oswalt as the filibuster on Community?
Yeah.
We watched that yesterday. He goes into
so good.
All the universe crossovers between X-Men and Avengers. Good stuff.
So there's that. I mean, Magda Life in the chat. We got Force dampening lizards, Isla Miri, and
that's true.
In the Thrawn trilogy, yep. We got the fake Kyber crystals in Master and Apprentice. Stop Kyber crystals. So that's technically a
the
Force.
colon crystals.
The colon crystals. That's right.
Gross.
So yeah, they do stop that. So I think we've had a little bit here and there. I love the idea of infusing the Force into things like the idols in this book and like Dagobah. I mean, the planet itself planets can be rich in the Force, right? And planets can, the planet from Clone Wars Wild Space, the Legends book where Bail Organa, our Lord and Savior, and Obi-Wan go, like that planet hinders Obi-Wan's Force abilities to where Bail has to become the hero that he rightly is and save the day. So yeah, I think we've gotten bits and pieces here and there. I think less so in canon, admittedly, but I think we're on that track.
A couple more.
Ray and Ben force healing each other. There's a.
Oh, yep.
I think there are a couple more examples that I thought of because I had these questions beforehand. But I wanted to shout out George Mann. The mask from Buyer Beware in Dark Legends is an example of memories being tied to an object, but specifically memories, not a personality.
Oh yeah.
Right? But Momin's mask in the Vader comic, though, would be an actual personality tied to an object. So
that's true.
Dark side artifacts. I mean,
is
that what
it's out there?
Is that what the stick thing that what's his name's got?
Wow, I don't know, man.
Description.
Markion Rose staff? Is that what you mean? You know, wait, guys, is that a stick
contribution?
I think the guy from Force Collector had a stick thing too. Are we talking about that?
You did. Wow.
I make no apologies.
Hey, also the dagger that Rey has in Rise of Skywalker, you know,
For sure.
dark side stuff in that.
Yeah,
Shout out to my
that
boy Uchi
knife thing that
Festoon.
what's her name's got.
Yeah, no, that's
pointy
way too
thing.
specific. The pointy thing. Thank you, Wes. Yeah, I love the idea of. I mean, Sith sorcery especially is so creepy and fascinating. I mean, you look at the Bane trilogy, probably is maybe the best. Then Dark Disciple as well. Like talking about there's magic inherent in the binding of Force energy.
Yeah.
And whenever we get to that stuff, it's really freaking cool. I think it's risky because some authors don't know how to do it. But it's definitely it's been written about. It's around.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry. I'm still chuckling a little bit about Corey.
Dick thing the guy has.
What's
right,
who's the Sith Lord in like KOTOR that talks through the statues, and he was gonna be Exar Kun? That's who I'm thinking of.
Exar Kun, yeah.
There's a couple of Sith Lords that like embedded themselves like in objects around their tombs and stuff in various media. And
Bane in season 6 of Clone Wars.
that's right. Bane does it. Exar Kun does it. There's one guy with an N that does it too. I can't remember what his name is.
Nihilus?
No.
Oh, Nagasato.
That guy. Yeah, Naga
Is that right?
Shadao, I think's his name, or Sadao, or
Okay.
Shadao, or something like that. Yeah, that guy too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Sith of old. That's
Well,
that's
so
that's like
yeah.
that's who they're talking about.
I guess it's
Yeah.
happened. Yeah, you know that we're talking about it. I'm like, this is actually decently common. I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah.
And
Stick
speaking
thing,
of
what's his name, Scott?
speaking of temples and tombs and that kind of thing, we knew that the Jedi Temple was built atop a Sith shrine because that fact was actually first relayed to us by James Luceno, Corey, in the novel
That's right.
Tarkin. But we didn't know that the shrine itself was referred to as the Shrine of the Depths. And the Sith, this book tells us, initially built that shrine because it was an area of a Force nexus. But then the Jedi built over it. And now relics and other objects that are imbued with the dark side of the Force are taken there specifically with the intent to purify them. So again, we see the Jedi kind of considering the dark side something to be purified. But I'm curious, what were your thoughts on getting to see this shrine, getting to see the Jedi Temple, which we've known for so long, in a new light?
That was dope.
Yeah,
That was dope. I
I
mean,
thought it was really cool. It was hard to accept a little bit for me, like of just like sit there. I mean, Jedi are just walking around and hanging out in this friggin' Sith temple thing. Like, I don't know, it just felt crazy out of place. And like it was supposed to. I mean, they have gone out of their way to keep it shut and make sure nobody wanders in there and stuff, right? So
The way is shut.
yeah.
that's right. It was made by those who are dead. But I mean, I said last week, so the Coruscant Temple stuff was some of my favorite stuff. And this was definitely part of it. I mean, I loved the story in E.K. Johnston's Ahsoka novel where she purifies the crystals to make her sabers white. And I love that Orla had that same kind of thing. And I love this idea now that the purifying is more like healing these objects from the pain that's been inflicted upon them. Like we learn more in the Kylo Ren comic by Charles Soule that in order to bleed a kyber crystal, you have to infuse it with pain and like hurt it literally so it bleeds. And the healing kind of, or the purifying heals that. So I like that maybe that's the idea with these artifacts as well, is that all these ancient Sith Lords, all these ancient dark users have been just inflicting pain and torture upon these objects, however that works. And then the purification, in essence, strips away pain and adds healing. And I think that's really kind of what the Jedi stand for as a whole at this point. And I really like that. I was wondering, I think we dropped more mentions of other EU content in this episode than in any other episode before.
A lot of references.
So maybe this book is really good for making us think about other Star Wars books and comics.
I mean, I have a ton. I'm axing prompts left and right now. Like there really is a lot to unpack about this book.
There are.
I think it really is good connective tissue. But
but sir, beautifully, Magda Life just put what I just said, the exact opposite idea in the chat, which also may be true.
Yeah.
Which is very exciting. Good thing about Star Wars. Who's to say?
Exactly. And no one's right and no one's wrong. But There were two major moments. I want to talk about who was wrong here. There were two major moments in this novel where Padawans learn about the death of their masters. And the first was Comac learning about the death of Simics, which he indirectly had a hand in. And the second is Reith learning about Jorah Mali's death. And Comac says some crazy things, some off-the-wall things at face value about his experience with losing his master. On page 260, he says, "It's ridiculous. They command that master and apprentice spend years together, working as a partnership, as close as any family could possibly be, and then they expect us not to become attached. I never thought about it before. I never had to, but now I can't escape how unfair it is. Worse than unfair. It's wrong." And then later on page 393, when he's speaking about grief, he said, there's no place in it there's no place for it in the Jedi, no place for it within you. So he buried it as deeply as a mine, one that could wait years before exploding. So there's that. There's Comac and how he handled it. And then there's Reith, who's actually told by a medical droid on page 229. And his response is this. As the droid rolled away, Reith leaned against the nearest wall. Breath wouldn't enter his lungs. His eyes wouldn't focus. His ears refused to make sense of the sounds surrounding him. He was nothing but his pulse and breath and the horrible knowledge that Master Jorah was gone. So does either one of these two handle this situation better? And I'm curious because we don't really get Reith's internal monologue the same way that we do Comac. But regardless, Comac seems to have a much stronger reaction, almost an anti-Jedi reaction than Reith.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Comac's discussion of grief in this book. It's a really good principle, and you guys know I love the flaws of the Jedi discussion a lot, and hearing him talk about grief is really spot on. It's like, oh, my master's dead. Good. Glad.
Yeah. Like
he's one with the Force. Never liked the guy anyway. I mean, how are they supposed to respond? Like, it's just there are a lot of flaws with the Jedi philosophy, and I do appreciate it. And Reith, on the other hand, do they not have HIPAA violations in space? You can just talk about like that was really clever writing to do. Just make it be dropped like that. I actually really like that detail.
Yeah, and especially since, again, they're assuming that at least the large majority of the readership lived through Jorah Mali's death in Light of the Jedi. So the whole book, like, I was waiting for when it was coming.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, God, where does it take place? And then to have it casually tossed to the side.
It hits you in the face like a friggin' baseball bat, man. It's just like, oh, snap.
Yeah. And I also think it's interesting because, like, nowadays, even from when the prequels came out, which was, not that long ago, quote unquote, it was still freaking over 20 years ago, oldness. But I think that our cultural conversation about grief and about letting yourself feel pain and sadness has evolved a ton. I think that we are very much more nowadays about like it's okay to feel grief. It's okay to experience sadness. Like, you don't have to just be okay. You don't have to just push it aside. You don't have to say like, oh, they're in a better place. They're in a better place. Like, no, the grief is an important part of the process. And I think that both Comac and Reith experience the inability to process that differently. And I like the way Claudia Gray writes it. I don't think she writes it in a preachy way. I don't think she writes it in a one is right, one is wrong kind of way. I love that she just presents the options. And I think that's what really good writers do, is that here's how this character feels. Here's how this character feels. And how you as a reader interpret that will allow you to make your own decisions about the events themselves. I think it's really smart of her to do it that way.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that. I think that in this new era of Jedi that we're learning about, I think it's interesting that the Jedi are having all the same thoughts, all the same feelings, making the same mistakes as we've always seen them make before. I don't know. And one thing that really struck me was Comac's comments on how you're not allowed to grieve in this book. And yet we had the Kyber Arch first presented to us, which is literally a monument to remember all the people that have died. You know what I mean? It feels like almost a monument to grief and a monument to remembrance. So I just found that a little bit curious.
I don't know. There's got to be some good Yoda quote somewhere about grief and death and stuff. Like, I feel like he has some words of wisdom here.
The opening lines for the Clone Wars TV show. There's got to be something in there.
Yeah, I mean, it's literally all about, like, you know, they're like celebrate that they are one with the Force now is like very much, it's present in a lot of major religions, right? Like, it's all about the positivity of them being gone from a bunch of different faiths, and I think the Jedi kind of have their own spin on it in that way. Like the Kyber Arch is the ultimate. Now they're a part of this giant thing. Their light, their crystal lives on, and isn't that great? Isn't that awesome? It will teach people. Isn't it a net positive?
Right.
And it's like, yeah, this is awesome. Like, it's not though, but it's not, guys. It's not awesome.
All right. Well, one other really interesting thing that has to do with the Force, and then we're going to jump into Easter eggs. On page 411, Dez, good old Dez, who we really haven't spent much time talking about because we thought he was dead for 2/3 of this novel. He decides to take the Barash vow. And according to this novel, the Barash vow was an extreme commitment to gaining ultimate communion with the Force. And those who took the vow spent years, sometimes even decades, in deep meditation and in solitude. And now we knew what this vow was. We've heard this term before in the Darth Vader, Dark Lord of the Sith comic line, in which Vader searches out a Jedi Master who was someone who had taken the Barash vow.
Oh, and right.
Yeah, it was Kirak Infila is how I'm pronouncing it. I don't know how you say it, but he was a really cool dude. Anyways, in that comic, the vow was presented more as like a means of atonement. And in this novel, on page 412, Reith, when he learns about Dez's decision to take this vow, he says, "But why? The vow, it's taken by Jedi who've made terrible mistakes. You didn't. You haven't broken your connection to the Force." "No," Dez said, "that was broken by the Drengir. The healers have pieced it back together again, but it's shaky. The cracks are showing. It won't hold, not unless I commit myself with all my strength to renewing it." So let's unpack that, because that's actually a massive revelation. I feel like you can lose your connection to the Force based on someone else's actions towards you, and someone else other than yourself can restore it. So did we know any of that before? And do you feel like it jives with the overall message of what the Force is?
I mean, I think it definitely jives. I think it can definitely jive. I think the idea of, like, you know, the Force, essentially the living Force, if you will, is the connection of all living things to all other living things, right? It's while you're alive. It's the power that it is the rock and the tree and the all that stuff. Corey's favorite monologue. And like any kind of dark side magic, like, can affect the Force, uses the Force to do things. So why couldn't it, you know, stop the flow in someone? I think that's definitely a not out of the realm of possibility as far as Force powers go. I mean, Nyla's 8 planets. Like, who are we to say you can't stop your chi? But I also like the idea of, like, having a healer, having someone, if we're going to go to another pop culture like Avatar: Last Airbender, having in Legend of Korra, when, like, benders lose their bending, they go to healers that have to, like, use the healing waters to, like, restore their connection to the Avatar state and all that kind of stuff. By the way, they're on Netflix. Go watch them right now. They're amazing. I think that kind of idea is definitely prevalent in Star Wars, that you can ask, again, asking for help as part of the grieving process. So if we want to bring it all together, right, Dez needs to ask for help from someone that can kind of help restore him, because you can only do so much on your own. If you're hurt, if you're grieving, if something's happened to you with trauma, especially, you can't do it all on your own. You have to have someone else help you out. So I liked that idea of it as well.
Yeah, so Dez was the more outgoing, between him and Reith, right? So he was who was one of your favorite Jedi, Corey? The one that in the Clone Wars?
I could always forget his name. In Dark Disciple, the main guy in Dark Disciple.
Quinlan Voss.
Quinlan Voss. For some reason, his name always escapes me. You guys know I'm bad with names anyway.
So he's like adventurous type. It's almost like he felt he was maybe superhuman in some sorts. Obviously because he's a Jedi, but when he was tortured by the Drengir, this could also point to the Drengir being force sensitive with the dark side too, and them being able to break him in such a way that he doesn't trust himself anymore. And so much like y'all were talking about, he needs to go on that extensive meditation, try and mend those wounds that the Drengir had put upon him. Because I'm sure when he was taken the first, he thought maybe he could do something. There's probably a backstory there about him trying to fight off the Drengir when they were torturing him. But they probably slowly, through their poison and then their thorns and their various types of torture, that they kind of got into him. Yeah.
Ooh.
And I mean, even barely getting out of that. Well, don't remember what the planet name was, or or even if it was named. But that whole arc of the escape pod, the hyperspace escape pods, or whatever those were, that was very interesting. But circle it back around. I think he was broken, and he needs to mend somehow.
Yeah, Cheryl brings up in the chat really nice one-to-one Dez. He's like the Winter Soldier that we're seeing now, like lost himself and then has to kind of come back to this point where he's not who he was before that happened to him. He's got to kind of figure out how to be a person again. I like Dez.
I like Dez quite a bit. Dez was cool. Dez was cool. But all right, y'all, it's time to move on to Easter eggs, connective tissue, and random ideas. So let's do this. Let's get this out of the way right off the bat. As confirmed by Charles Soule on Twitter, the Amaxine station from this novel is the exact same one where Snoke welcomed Kylo in his amazing hat in the Rise of Kylo Ren comic. The same exact one. Go back and look up the panels.
I forget that.
I didn't know that.
I forget that.
Same place.
I didn't know that was really there. That's funny.
Yeah. And now the Amaxine warriors themselves, the people the Amaxine station was named after, actually first appeared in Claudia Gray's novel Bloodline, but were also mentioned in Resistance Reborn and the Rise of Kylo Ren comic. But here they are once again. So they're getting some play. On page 5 of this book, a group of Bith are drinking Port in a Storm. And Port in a Storm is a high-octane wine first written about also in Bloodline, but retconned into Attack of the Clones as one of the drinks in the Outlander Club. And it was also mentioned in Master and Apprentice, making this Gray's apparent favorite Star Wars alcoholic beverage.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. It's also a recipe, I believe, in the Batu cookbook.
Is it?
Yes.
What's it called? Right. What's it called? Port in the Storm?
Port in the Storm.
Port in
I would drink one.
Storm.
I don't know what it is, but it sounds good.
I drink 1 or 6. Yeah, it'd be great.
So on page 12, Reef thinks to himself, "You're falling prey to pride. Too much pride in yourself is proof that such pride is unwarranted." And it's not really an Easter egg, but it did remind me a lot of one of the Clone Wars opening lines. Too much pride in yourself is proof that such pride is unwarranted.
That'd be great.
Now, on page 14, one of Reeth's classmates is taunting him and says, rolling her eyes. Her name was Kim, by the way. Freaking Kim. She rolls her eyes and she says, "Thanks for the lecture, Master Yoda. Now, will you loosen up and have some fun already?" First of all, Kim, don't you use Master Yoda's name in vain. Okay. And second of all, don't tell me how to live my life.
He teaches kindergarten for 400 years. The guy's fun. Okay.
Well, also on page 14, Reeth mentions wanting to see Imri and Vernestra at Starlight Beacon, both characters from Justina Ireland's A Test of Courage. Mm-hmm. Also on page 14, this was a great page. This is about Reeth. It says, "He smiled, he danced, he drank certain beverages that, while not technically forbidden, were frowned upon for Padawans his age." So time out on this one for a second, because one, have we ever seen a drunk Jedi, especially an underage one? Because that sounds like a real Rail Averos thing.
I was going to say, it's got to be Rail Averos,
That's all we were thinking was Rail Averos.
Buy you some beer.
Two, maybe this is why Yariel Poof can't ever keep his head from wobbling back and forth. 3, do you think that there's a don't drink and use the Force rule? Because if not, there really needs to be. And
God.
4, what exactly is the age for drinking in this galaxy? Shouldn't it actually be based on like the species, like your species and how it ages? Because Grogu was 50. Can you drink legally?
Oh my God. maybe every bartender needs to memorize the age for every species on the planet. That's part of bartending school.
You must be this tall to
1/5 of
ride.
the expected age of death.
Guys, Real Avros totally had a fake ID that just said Yoda. Like, son, you're 700. I sure am.
Could have been walking around sneak drinking and like taking already half drinking drinks off of tables like you do when you're 10 years old at a wedding. What?
Oh my gosh, yes. And then in his lightsaber, if you unscrew the bottom of Real Avros's lightsaber, there's just a secret compartment full of booze.
It's just a flask.
I found
it.
speaking of booze, I found the recipe. It's for Port in the Storm. It has spiced rum, ruby port. I don't even know what that is. Ginger liqueur, lime juice, strong ginger beer, and a wedge garnish.
Wow.
This is actually a fairly significant Wikipedia page, just for the record. There's
You know
a lot
what?
of
That must
reference
be-
to this. A
that
lot of
must be,
references to this.
That must be Nora Wexley's favorite drink that's got that wedge garnish.
Port
Oh.
wine
man.
is a Portuguese
Not to be
wine.
outdone, Eric.
All right.
Yeah, port's great.
We got to move on. Page 18, we get this quote. Trust me, there's at least one ship in this spaceport that wants our money badly enough to take us straight through the maw if need be. And this, of course, is the cluster of black holes called the Maw, or the Maw cluster, that we see Han Solo pilot the Falcon around in Solo: A Star Wars Story. On page 32, Affy makes a sticky bun out of powder and water, just like Rey did in The Force Awakens. That was
Nice.
Looks so
Nice.
good.
I wrote that down.
Page 33, Reith is explaining Jedi to Affy, and he says, we ground ourselves in a spiritual existence and give up individual attachments in order to focus entirely on greater concerns. To which Affy says, so that means no sex. And I just wanted to bring that moment up.
That was a great
moment.
That was one of the best lines in that book, I thought. And also
It was.
classic Claudia Gray, too. I mean, it was just like straight up her alley. So that means no sex.
Well, and funny enough, there's been a lot of chatter, or there was a lot of chatter when this book came out about this exact question on Twitter and other stuff. And there was actually a tweet from Kevin Scott, mind you, who is writing the next adult novel in the High Republic. And he was quoting George Lucas as saying, Jedi Knights aren't celibate.
That's
The
true.
thing that is
He did say
forbidden is
that.
attachments and possessive relationships. So we could be seeing this later in the High Republic. We don't know.
Well, and, if Jedi can't have sex, then
God.
I feel better about never having it myself. So I think
Okay.
that's the rule.
All right. And we have learned way too much about everybody tonight. But we are going to press on. Page 36, we learned that the Padawan braid used to be a requirement, but now is actually a choice made by every master. And Jorah Mali does make Reith have one, which is interesting because once we see the prequels, they seem to be mandatory again, right?
Yeah, right.
I love the idea that Obi-Wan's like, oh, it looks stupid. And Qui-Gon's like, no, it's a rule. No, sorry. And then he gets always like, wait a minute. No, sorry, it's a rule.
Also, he gets that thing ripped out. And is that that was this
does.
book, wasn't it? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it was the
I couldn't-
Wookiee baby
I couldn't remember.
ripped it
I
out.
couldn't remember if it was this one or the last one. That
Dude, that's not like one long hair.
no,
That's a lot
all right.
of hair.
That is
Braid.
that is like a significant chunk of his scalp came with that. That is
Not good.
Yeah.
I'm getting nauseated.
Funny enough, Comac early in the book thinks to himself that he wouldn't make his Padawan have one if he had a Padawan. So now that we know that Reith will be his Padawan, we know he won't have to regrow it. So good for him, because it's probably scar tissue where it used to be.
Yeah, exactly.
He's gonna have a bald spot there. It's like if he ripped out all the stem cells and everything, it's all gone. I mean, he's freaking screwed up now.
Yeah, that's gnarly. Okay, page 45, coaxium is mentioned, and Affy actually holds it with her bare hands. Ouch. But cool to see
Epic.
that come back. On page 58, Issamer, the leader of the Directorate Kidnappers, so the guy that kidnapped the two nobles, he's a Lasat. And that's one of the
True.
few canon Lasat that we've met outside of Zeb Aurelios and
Yep.
Star Wars Rebels, and Master Jaro, who was Cal Kestis' master in Jedi Fallen Order. So that was fun.
That was great.
On page 60, the Hutts are revealed to be behind the kidnapping of the nobles. So they put the Directorate up to it. And, so we know not much has actually changed in the crime world between the High Republic and the original trilogy, because the Hutts were still a high and mighty operational crime syndicate.
Nope. They get it.
Yeah. On page 66, Leox says, remember, everybody, your perceptions define the reality of the universe. And that is a total reference to our boy Qui-Gon in The Phantom Menace when he says your focus determines your reality.
Oh, boy, Qui-Gon, right over here, right next to me. My newest Funko Pop.
You got your new Funko. It's beautiful.
Hey, buddy.
If I was to get another one, I think it would be that one.
It's a good one.
It's wonderful. Wonderful.
And his little portrait thing is the Jedi Council floor. So that's fun. Even though it's a Tatooine pop, because sure, I guess.
Well, on page 77, Orla says, what in the seven hells is going on?
That was a great line.
We've seen hell referenced in Star Wars before, right? Han yelling, then I'll see you in hell in Empire Strikes Back. That's what I always go back to. But this is the first mention of seven hells. And so I don't know if this is like a reference to Dante's Inferno or Game of Thrones. We don't know. But it's intriguing that we're expanding on that idea within Star Wars. Now, page 93, we get this quote. Across the lockers and other bay doors were scrawled some symbols, not labeling, but actual handwriting or painting. Affie had never handwritten anything in her life, which was hardly unique. Probably she'd never even met someone who wrote something down. This hit me so hard. I was like, have we never seen anyone write anything by hand in Star Wars?
There was a big discussion. There was a big discussion about this after The Last Jedi came out because of the sacred Jedi texts or books, physical books, and and did we discuss it? Was that on this show or did I hear it somewhere else? Of like the concept of the Jedi, like being so foreign to everybody in the Rebellion era, and it'd only been 20 years since they were like in the hundreds, right? So like everybody just forgot that the Jedi were a thing, but like the age of I don't know what you would call it. The age of like remembrance is like super short term. Like everybody has super short term memory because nobody writes it. Like knowledge is ever changing and fast and it's crazy. So
it's the damn kids these days. They just don't practice cursive anymore, and that's what leads to the fall of Jedi.
That's right.
Well, on page 108, we get one of Eric's favorite moments. Comac levitates. And that is the first time that we've seen that in canon since Rey's meditation in The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah. And I love that he's like, I'm going to fly and then sound like a demon with a booming voice. Because that's what I would do. Like, hey, I can fly. You should probably all leave before I kill you with my laser sword. It's like, okay.
It's sorry. Me, the guy with the stick thing. Whatchamacallit. That's what he said.
It's all what's his name with his stick thing.
On page 112, we learn that Jedi Master Simix is a Philithar, which is a giant limbless snake species that was first introduced also in Claudia Gray's bloodline. But how does he wield a lightsaber, guys? He doesn't have arms.
With the Force.
With the Force. All right. Good to know.
That's my question for everything I don't know.
Because the Force.
The Force.
All right. Comac later on says, no, I've encountered trees deep in the dark side before. I know what it feels like. Is that perhaps the earliest reference that we've gotten to the cave tree on Dagobah, or do you think there's a bunch of trees like that around the galaxy?
Ooh. I'd buy that. I'd buy that's the idea.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm selling.
I think there's a bunch. I think there's a lot more.
Yeah, because in Clone Wars Season 6, when Yoda goes to Dagobah, he had never been there before, right?
Yeah, the Force showed him to get there.
Yeah,
so
I think it's more likely that there's. Yeah, I think you're right, Wes. There's trees probably similarly other places, but yeah, that's kind of cool.
Yeah. Well, we have some more drinks to talk about.
Excellent.
There's both aboard the vessel, so the ship, Leox and Affie's ship, there's both Chandrillan tea and Jedha tea. Both of those were specifically mentioned, so that's fun. And then on page 185, Tanneray wine is mentioned, and that's an Alderaanian wine that's been referenced pretty extensively now in Star Wars novels. Rael Averroes drinks it as Lord Regent of Pygel in Claudia Gray's Master and Apprentice. Inferno Squad received a bottle of Tanneray wine to celebrate the success of their first mission together. And, of course, Tanneray is served at Oga's Cantina on Batuu, where Zayd Khalideh even had a glass at the recommendation of Nan, the bartender. Different Nan, guys. When he found out that his favorite Corellian wine was unavailable. So lots of love for Tanneray.
It's amazing how much it gets drunk, considering that there are literally a finite amount of bottles because the planet blew up.
That is true. That is a good point.
You know, you brought up an interesting point, sort of secondarily there. I really would like to see Jeddah brought to life in the High Republic era. Like, why are
Yes.
they? Why are
Yes.
those guys guarding the temple and stuff? Like, maybe that'll get expanded upon.
I want to see those giant the Jedi statues that are like sideways in the dust. Do it again, Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings episode
with that
like the Gondor
crazy,
guys.
the crazy music.
I want it. I want it.
That was my interpretation right there.
That was great.
I was about to ask you to do it one more time.
All right. And there it is. Oh man! All right, page 195. We learned that Scoverbine is a bival, and the bival were a species from the agricultural world proto-branch, which was heavily featured in Dooku Jedi Lost. On page 203, we get the Blurg reference for all the Mandalorian fans out there.
Great.
Blurg.
On page 207, we get this quote: "The Legacy Run was the biggest, best thing going in terms of transports, trusted to only the finest captain." Rest in peace, Hedda Cassett.
It was great. Awesome.
On page 215, on the Syrian ship, the Journeyman, which is the ship that was on fire that all the Jedi were trying to rescue people from, there are Syrians, there are Wookiees, there are Ogamites, and there are Sarkans. Those are the species that are mentioned. Remember, Syrians are Kiadi Mundi species, so of course the Syrians are with the Wookiees. And if the Syrians were saved first, they would probably say, but what about the Wookiees? But
What about the Wookiee?
What's interesting about this part is Ogamites. This is their first appearance in canon. Previously, they were a species known to be traitors in legends. And the first Ogamite we met was someone named Anduville, who was a female rebel operative who appeared in the Tatooine Sojourn, a comic strip from the Los Angeles Times in 1979.
Wow.
Oh yeah, that one, Charles.
Holy crap, dude.
Syrians and Wookiees and Ogamites.
This is based on my research. Trevor, correct me if I'm wrong. Now, Sarkans were also on the ship, like I said, and they actually first appeared in the 97 special edition of A New Hope. They were actually one of the added Cantina creatures. It's the hookah smoking, red turban wearing lizard man, if you remember him. That's his long form name. He goes by Milos.
Hey George, what's that admiral guy's name? What's his name? That's Tarkin. Okay, what's the guy with the little turban? Sarkin. Tarkin? Yeah. That guy's Tarkin? Uh-huh.
And now the fun fact about that guy, though, the face of that mask of the hookah smoking, red turban wearing lizard man was actually just another creature's head turned backwards. And they just put a turban and it still looked like a face. But anyways.
That's perfect.
Yeah. really going all out for the special edition.
I think, what is it? Hookah smoking red turban lizard man. Come on. Also the name of my my hardcore band from 2004.
So your next fantasy football team.
my autobiography.
Okay. Wow. Page 220, we see the Jedi Council in the Coruscant Temple for the first time in the High Republic, and only 3 masters are there at the time. And it was Adampo, who's a Yarkoran, aka Yakface from back in the day, Rosason, who's a human, and an unnamed 3rd member. And what's cool is Adampo is described as a male and Rosason is described as a female in this book, but in Light of the Jedi, that was reversed, with Adampo being a female and Rosason being a male. So there's clearly a lot left to learn about this council. We don't know who they are. We don't know what their genders are. We got to get this fleshed out in some upcoming novels.
I just love that 3 of them showed up because the rest of them were like, can I just zoom in? Do I have to come into the office for this meeting? Like, I can just be remote, right?
Yeah, that is true.
Good for them.
On page 227, there was this bit in the Coruscant infirmary that hit a little too close to home with our current pandemic. A pill droid says to Reef, all hospitals are at capacity in the aftermath of this hyperspace disaster. Every medical facility must operate at full capacity, or beyond it, Reef thought, taking in the terrible overcrowding. And that got me. Because remember, we read this months ago. I was like, oh, that's too close to home.
Indeed.
Yeah. Although I got to say it to put a little bit of brightness into this talk now. I mean, a lot of brightness because Charles, you're freaking killing it with these Easter eggs as always. Let's be clear. I did see this Reddit post the other day that was like an ICU ward that had 0 patients and they threw confetti in the air. First time in like over a year.
I saw that.
That's
too.
awesome.
It's beautiful.
That's awesome.
We're getting there, y'all.
Now, also on page 228, Corey, you'll appreciate this. A medical droid approaches Reef in the infirmary, and the first thing that he says is, "Your condition is acceptable." Now, if I started off all of my conversations with my patients like that, oh my word, just walk into the room.
Is how I start my
condition is
Oh no,
acceptable.
you'd be efficient. Ooh.
Yeah. Oh man.
Do it.
Maybe you would have got here on time, Charles.
Oh.
Yeah. Oh, hey, I was here on time. I was just kind of
True.
Little behind the scenes action, huh, Corey?
The people have no idea. All right, on page 239, when Affy goes out to lunch with Scoverbine on Coruscant, we get this quote. Affy made her first attempt while they were eating at one of the stranger local establishments, a place with checkered floors, shiny red seats, and waiter droids that rolled around on impractical wheels. Now, maybe this is not actually Dex's Diner, right?
Oh my
'Cause
God.
This is the High Republic, but it's got to be a reference to it, right? At
This
least
is
a
100%
nod.
Dex's Diner.
Yeah, and we don't know the lifespan of basilisks, I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Trevor,
but
Jose.
maybe.
Not off the
Maybe
top
it's a
of my
family
head.
joint. You know?
Yeah, but no, if you go back and you look up, or if you just remember well enough, look up Dex's Diner. I mean, there are checkered floors. Obviously, we know the waiters were
Yeah.
rolling around on wheels. I mean, it fits. So.
Oh yeah.
maybe.
Oh, you mean it's Dex, son of Dex, son of Dex, son of Dex, son of Dex?
Dex's son. That's his name. All right.
Obi-Wan.
That was good.
Hello, Dex. I'll be right with you.
An old basilisk is 61 to 74 years old. So
Okay.
Ooh,
Well,
said nothing.
that's,
only a couple of these, a couple generations.
yeah.
I haven't seen one of these
Possible.
since I was prospecting on Subterrell.
and
Love
it matters how big your pocketbook is.
Oh, how good your manners are.
Do you know that it took me
Oh,
15
man.
years to realize he had a mustache?
What did you think that was?
Just skin. I just thought it was like a shadow. I didn't know. Maybe my TV sucked.
Oh man.
Oh, he's a
All right.
mustache. Excellent.
Page 248. we get-
Kaminoan saber dog. Sorry, we did almost all of them.
All right, on page 248, we get a member of the Trototome species mentioned, and that's the same species as none other than Cloud from The Rise of Skywalker. I think it's the first time we've seen that species beyond that movie.
Best character in Star Wars.
Yep.
Yeah. On page
Sure.
263, we get this quote. Cassell had slightly long front teeth, round eyes, and a flatly upturned nose that made him resemble a bright blue Vorpak. And in canon, on Star Wars Resistance, there is a Vorpak that lives on the Colossus named Buggles, so that's fun.
Oh,
and
yeah.
in Legends, they popped up a couple of times in the Jedi Academy trilogy, which was recently covered on Legends Look Back. So go have a listen to that if you haven't listened to those.
Cross promotion.
Yeah, buddy. All right, page 282. Grendelids are mentioned. That's Lady Proxima species.
Oh, hell yeah. A lot of
On-
solo references.
There are. On page 282, after Orla discovers Leox's stash of spice, he mentioned it's medicinal, which I loved. On page 287, Affy says, "This is insanely dangerous." And Leox says, "Yeah, but it's going to be cool as hell." And I felt like that's just Star Wars in general.
That is absolutely it. That's also how we started this podcast.
That's a great line.
Yes, it is a great line.
Insanely dangerous. That's cool as hell.
On page 318, we get this quote. Lightsaber dueling was widely considered the coolest class at the Jedi Temple. All the emphasis on dueling obscured one simple truth. This was a situation a Jedi would almost certainly never encounter, even once in a lifetime of service. Only other Jedi carried lightsabers. Jedi did not fight each other in the field or anywhere else for that matter. Ergo, dueling was effectively useless, except as exercise. And we forget this. We forget that
Yeah.
there's legit.
Okay.
There's no such thing as lightsaber battles because there's always a lightsaber
There's
battle.
so
right?
many lightsaber battles.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. But
Like
then at the
Qui-Gon's-
same time, sorry, go ahead.
No, I say Qui-Gon's inner monologue when he fights Darth Maul in Phantom Menace just has to be insane. Like, oh my god, it's a lightsaber. Ah, what the hell? Yeah, oh my god, is this a Sith? Are the Sith back? Ah! Like, that's it, roughly.
But then at the same time, spoiler alert for anyone that has not read A Test of Courage yet, there actually is one Jedi versus Jedi duel in that story. So yeah, I won't say any more than that.
It's cool.
On page 335, Orla makes a blaster bolt move slow motion so she can step around it. That is yet another new force power. We've seen them frozen in midair and then let go, but we've never seen them just make them go slow-mo. So that was pretty sick.
Good stuff. It's like Jedi Fallen Order ish, right?
Yeah. Actually, that's true. That's a good point.
Our boy Cal
Kestis. On page 342, Comac says nothing a Kolto rinse can't fix. So again, we see Kolto making its appearance as old school Bacta. On page 362, we see the quote, "The Jedi moved as quiet as Tuca cats." So there's the obligatory Tuca cat reference. It is in every canon novel. I kid you not.
They're great. It should be.
After page 4, or on page 417 rather, after Orla buys her new ship, right? She buys this brand new ship to go off on her way-seeking adventures, and she says, "I'm calling her the Light Seeker." And the sales droid says, "Duly registered." And all I could think was, there's no way that name is available. Like, have you ever been on a website and it's like, it asks you for a username and your first attempt is taken? That's totally what would have happened here. The droid would have been like, "I'm sorry, that's taken. May I suggest Lightseeker 457829?"
Yeah, exactly. Look at gamer tag.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I love it.
That's where we'll wrap it up on that stupid thought. So that'll do it for the Into the Dark Roundtable. Now let's go back. Let's re-rate the book on a scale of 1 to 10. If your answer changed, tell me why. If it didn't change, tell me why. And finally, give me any last thoughts that you have. Eric, I will come to you first.
Great. I think I rated this book a 7.4 on the first go, and I'll make it even. I'll give it a 7.5. I think is where I'm going to stick with this one. I like all the stuff it introduces in a theoretical sense. Like the freaking the everything about the High Republic is so fascinating. I love all the lore. Ooh, super chat from Cad Ben. Serious props for Charles's stellar research.
Yeah.
100%. These are incredible stuff you do, man.
Yes, you always find
3 pounds.
That's right. You always find some crazy reference that's just like 10 levels deep, and it's pretty impressive, Charles.
Yeah.
Seriously.
And honestly, it's that stuff that really made this book stand out to me more than the book itself. The stuff we talked about with the Jedi and the expansion of Force stuff is cool, more so than maybe the Drenger, which is why I don't rate it necessarily higher. But again, at your baseline Claudia Gray character level, it's still going to be a good book. I mean, let's be clear, it's not bad by any stretch of the imagination. I think the bar is so high, it just didn't necessarily hit it for me. So a respectable 7.5 is where I'm going to stay for Into the Dark.
I'll keep mine at 7.5 too. Like, I think you're right. I think it would be a crime to put anything by Claudia Gray less than like 7.5, like for real. Like, just, I mean, she's an incredible writer. She does her research. Like, she's still a superstar. This book hit a little more like Bloodline did for me. Like, that's the other Claudia Gray novel that's not maybe quite as popular as her other stuff. And I just didn't quite love that one as much as a lot of people did. And that's kind of how I felt about this. I like that it did expand on the High Republic a good deal. We got to see more of kind of the different angle of adjacent events that were happening, which is pretty interesting. I'll be excited what is coming down the pipeline next. Kevin Scott's novel is the next one, I believe, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it's gonna be at the end of June.
Yeah.
So we got a little ways, but whoo. And then Justina Ireland's novel is essentially the spiritual successor to this one.
Yes.
Wes.
I think I rated it at somewhere like 8.4. I'm actually going to move it down to 8.2. Now that we talked about it a little bit more, I did like how it was different. How the villains were different, like with the Drangir. Didn't necessarily like the Drangir as a villain to go up against the Jedi, but I wish the story was more involved with Light of the Jedi and that whole overarching plot. It kind of seemed like they skimmed it a little, or she kind of hinted at it a little bit, and then had a whole different story with the Amexing station and going back and forth. So I kind of wanted it to either branch off of Light of the Jedi more, but it was still a really good read. Still a really good read. I enjoyed it. But I wish it kind of had played more off of Light of the Jedi than it did.
Yeah. And I'm glad you did that, Wes, so that I'm not alone, because I actually am also going to move my score down just a little bit. I think I gave
a little bad. This is like a new. This is a new precedent for us.
It is, but I want to be very clear about why I'm doing it. So I think I gave it an 8.0 if I remember correctly, and I'm moving to a 7.8. Not much, but here's the thing. I'm dead serious when I tell you I enjoyed reading this book as much as I did Light of the Jedi. Very different kind of book, but I had just as much fun. So I'm not rating the fun that I had or how much I enjoyed the read. Through our conversations, I can appreciate some more plot holes, or some, not plot holes, but things that I think could have been fleshed out differently, that would have made the story progress more effectively. I think it could have been a stronger, tighter story in and of itself. That said, it is a great addition to the High Republic, and this is not just a story contained in this novel. We know there are outside pressures. There's a massive story that's going on. This is phase 1. Like, there's much more to this, and the High Republic in and of itself is fantastic. This book is fantastic for what it is, and there's so much more to come, and it's only going to get better.
For sure. I think this book is in the UCNE reading order. I think we have this book placed in tier 2. Which is the should read category, right? It's not like in the top like 20 books you should absolutely read first, like because you absolutely have to read them. But I think it's definitely up there with should read. It's like it's worth doing. It was a fast book too. I mean, I read this in one day. Like, I mean, given it was kind of a manic day, but still, like you could probably do this in 2 or 3 sittings on a beach or a vacation and get some enjoyment out of it. And I actually saw a lot of people online saying they enjoyed it more than Light of the Jedi. So totally, if you did, that's your game. Nothing wrong with that. We're just 4 guys with 4 opinions. So don't let us sway what you think of it.
Yeah, and I guess we don't say that as much on books we're like over the moon about, but that always remains true in these roundtables. And like as we end tonight, we really want to make sure that if you freaking loved Into the Dark, that's awesome. I'm so stoked that if that's like a 9 or a 10 book for you, hell yeah. I want every book to be a 9 or a 10. And like, that's so cool. And nothing that anyone says should take away from that. And if you don't love a book everyone else loves, same kind of deal. Yep. We are, as Corey said, bringing you our opinions. We've always promised to be honest with you guys as an audience. I know we've gotten the occasional flack for being a little too high on some books, but we really love some stuff. So we will always tell you what we think. And obviously, the next roundtable in a few weeks, again, we're giving Charles a little bit of a break before the Victory's Price roundtable. We'll round out the Alpha Squadron trilogy. A very different kind of conversation, obviously, with that one. We can't wait to share with you all. But before we go, we do want to take one last chance and say thank you to everyone in the chat who has stuck around. All your comments tonight were astoundingly good, and it's seriously one of the coolest things about doing this show. We hope we see you every week. A very, very happy birthday to Cheryl Bell, who joined us. And as I do my little outro here, we will talk about how we're going to hang out with her in just a little bit. But as always, Charles, just mind-blowingly good work on these prompts. The Easter eggs, they rival anything out there on the internet. Cannot wait for your next ones, buddy. Cannot wait for more High Republic content. But on that, my friends, that'll do it for this week's episode of The Living Force. If you already support us on Patreon, head over to the Discord and join the Aftermath Birthday After Show video channel to hang out for the after party. A special thank you goes out to Cheryl Bell, Patrick Ortiz, and Carl Sander on our Jedi High Council, and Elizabeth Cloutier, Jason Mitchell, Freddie C., and Sally and Chris Eilerson on our Alliance High Command for your amazing support. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Eric Eilerson. Corey is at Doc Star Wars MD. Charles Zetzi Henkel. Wes is at Boss Wes. A special thank you to Matt Davenport, our amazing editor, Ryan, our graphic designer extraordinaire, and Wes, our producer and community manager. Thank you to Corey, Charles, and Wes for podcasting with me tonight. Thank you to all of you in the chat for hanging out. And as always, may the Force be with you.